If you have attended news events over the past 50 years, probably somewhere in that room was the gentleman to my right. That is RoyLewis. At 87 years old, he is still working in the business. He's not giving it up. He's up and down. He's at news conferences around the city. And one of the things that Roy has been doing is basically new since he was about 17 years old in his hometown of Natchez, Mississippi.
Natchez.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Sam Ford, and this podcast is all about RoyLewis. That's about 70 years in the business, on and off, huh?
That's from the beginning. Yeah, I really got into news business in high school, and I was going into it as a trade, printer, hands selecting.
Okay, something like shop or whatever. Then your trade was going to be
printing. A printer. I was going to be a printer. So
did you work for anybody down there?
Yeah, I worked for Mr. Theodore Johnson, who had a print shop, and they had a program in our high school, which I guess could be vocational. You want to be a printer, you want to be a nurse, you want to be a beautician, you want to be a car mechanic. Mm-hmm. So you select this trade, and then you get out of high school 1 o'clock. You go and spend 2 hours there each day, like it's a class. And just so happens that this print shop that Mr. Johnson had a newspaper called the Natchez Leader. And so we were doing cards, flyers, posters, and the type had to be set, individual letters, and then you had presses where you're running the presses. So would you be involved in writing or taking pictures from the newspaper as well? No. Bill Williams, the editor, and we had linotype to set the type for the newspaper. But for the printing things, usually you had to do letters and lay it out, lock it in, and
so basically kind of the mechanical work of
printing the flyers and posters, and then the newspaper was a part of the business.
Okay. And did you get involved in the newspaper at all?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was there helping to run the presses. Sometimes we work all night, get the paper out. I wound up being circulation man. I distribute the paper. Mr. Johnson would let me use his car. I would distribute the papers to spots where, we sold the paper.
17-year-old in Natchez, Mississippi. Any desire to get out of there, go to some?
I had been wanting to go to Chicago long before the newspaper.
Okay.
And really wanted to go because my aunt, who was kind of was taking care of me, she moved there, and I wanted to follow her and was going to follow her, but that didn't happen. But when the things that I went through in high school and being able to participate in church service, that kind of stuff, when I got to Chicago, I had a feeling that I might not have been as involved.
Yeah, let's back up a little bit. You were telling me basically that your mother died when you were, I guess, 5 years old.
Right.
And your family was sort of raised between your father and other family members and aunts and you?
Well, we kind of, me and my two sisters went to my grandfather, but my mother, I was born on the plantation, Shieldsburg, and we were there, and then we moved to another plantation, which was the Mazeek's plantation. And D.C., the Mazeek's, Dr. Mazeek here in D.C., that was his family. So they were Creole, and they had two plantations. And so we moved from Shieldsburg to Oakland. And so that's where my mother died. I was 5. That was 1942.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what was it like? I mean, I guess you lived to the age of 17. My images of Mississippi is, family New Haven and danger, yeah.
Dangerous.
What was it like, down there?
It was scary because so many things happened a lot of people wound up Monday, missing. A lot of people wound up missing, and the parents, especially the mothers, had to deal with their children, especially sons, in terms of be careful. Certain areas of town, you don't need to be in it after dark. Even though I worked in some of those, my first paper route, I was a paper boy. Before I worked at the black paper, I was a paper boy. So my route was into suburbs, the white communities. So I'd worked in white communities, and it was the thing about Natchez is metropolitan in terms of Mississippi town. It had a lot of social stuff. It had a lot of stuff going on.
And folks, you hear snoring. This is my dog Miko, who's laying here on the floor, and she's been snoring. So if you hear this extraneous noise, that's what it is. I'm sorry, Roy, but
it's all right.
They're going to hear this snoring.
Need to be identified. It's all right. Say, you breaking my nap. That's what he's done.
So, but you said it was kind of scary. I mean, did you kind of work to avoid conflict with white people? Was that?
Well, we worked for them. I worked, my first major job was with Walgreens. I worked in Walgreens as a busboy. And Walgreens supermarket. I worked in the theaters. My first real job was a shoe shine boy, but I'm saying I worked in all these areas. I worked at a jewelry store, and the interaction there was there. I mean, it wasn't like you walking around and the Klans on every corner or that kind of thing. Yeah. Because the Natchez, the population was almost, dominant black in Natchez.
Right.
And so Natchez was a rich town. Very rich town because of the cotton and all of that. So it was. But did
you feel threatened at all? I guess that's the question. As a young man growing up.
Well, as a young man growing up, yeah, you had to deal with the reality.
Did you witness anything that was scary?
Mm-hmm.
Some black
I had some scary incidents myself. Yeah, of course, that was life threatening in a sense. But, you couldn't walk around being scared all the time. I mean, you just were cautious.
Scary, give me an example, a scary incident you underwent.
It's incidents that I'm walking down the road on the way in, some young men driving around, having fun. I got hit in the head, with it right up here in my forehead.
With what?
A stick. I'm not just driving along in the car. And
so their idea of entertainment is to stop and hit a black person.
They didn't stop. They just kept going. They hit me in the forehead. Yeah, they kept going. They hit out the window. I'm walking down the road.
And you didn't report it to the police?
No, I didn't. I just thank goodness that my eyes were not hit.
And that was one of those things.
And there were other situations.
Was that part of the reason you wanted to move to Chicago?
I wanted to move to Chicago because, there was always Chicago is paved with gold streets and all that. And a lot of things, a lot of people that left Natchez come back home with the big cars and,
so there was a pipeline, it seemed, from Mississippi to Chicago. That was the thing.
Chicago, Detroit, Indianapolis, that was kind of like the migration pattern to Chicago.
Particularly Chicago is what I'm hearing. And the Chicago Defender, which was a black newspaper.
That came to Natchez on the train along with Jet and Ebony.
So y'all were reading the Chicago papers.
And the Jet magazine.
And Jet.
Yeah.
So those were big, and those were from Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
So what did you think?
But family members go, and then the family goes, and one person go, and then somebody else comes. That person puts that person up, and
now did you plan to be a journalist of some kind? Was that one of the reasons you wanted to go to Chicago, or you just wanted to go to Chicago?
Well, I wanted to go to Chicago, but the journalism piece, the newspaper piece. I didn't think that when I went to Chicago that I was going to get a job at Ebony or Jet, Ebony magazine. Because my godmother, who taught Mr. Johnson in high school.
Mr. Johnson is
John H. Johnson.
He is the owner of Ebony and Jet magazine.
Right.
Okay.
And I looked for a job in Chicago, post office and other places. And then she had instructed me if I go by Johnson or Ebony, tell him she said hello, Johnny. And so I wound up there one day, took the tour of the building and told the young lady my story, and she introduced me. She knocked on Mr. Johnson's door, and he came out, and I told him who I was. She told him who I was, and I told him my godmother, Mattie B. Frazier, told me to tell him hello. And he said, oh yeah. You know, he went to school, she taught him in high school, and the young lady told him that I was looking for a job. And so he see what he could do. So the next 2 weeks I was working in the subscription department, running addressograph machines with a Christmas promotion for that year. And so that's how it happened. I mean, I had no way of knowing just by doing that I would get the job.
But connections and Natchez to Chicago. I know Miss So and So. John Johnson said, "Okay, I'm giving you a job."
Right.
That's how it works.
Yeah, that's how it works. Connection, or you find a place to stay, or somebody puts you up, family members, and recommend you to not just Johnson but other jobs.
Yeah, but you must have met kind of the most prominent black man in Chicago.
Well, I was happy about that.
At that time,
I worked real hard there and was there for about 14, 15 years.
Now, what did you do at Ebony and Jet?
I ran addressograph machines, then Remington Rand machines, punch cards, and then IBM punch cards, and then they brought the computer in. And my job really was to make sure that you got all your publications. Ebony, Jet, Negro Digest, Black World, or Negro Digest at the time. And so my job was to make sure that you got your renewal notices, you got your magazine, when you send your subscription back in or your renewal back in. That was subscription department, which is people say, but let me tell you, the advertising rate is determined by your quoted, your numbers, your subscription rate.
And particularly in those times, there was no online subscriptions. It was all
magazine, hard copies.
Yeah. So that's it. So in a sense, you kind of worked in the journalism world of newspaper, but as a printer. Then you go to the journalism world of Ebony and Jet, the premier black magazines in the U.S.
Yeah.
But you were working in circulation. How did you get into photography?
People at Ebony and Jet, I was hanging out in the art department, hanging out in the lab, and so photography is all around me. But I didn't really get a camera until I got to the service in 61.
Okay, so what happened then?
I bought a camera, guy.
So how'd you end up in the service?
Oh, I got drafted by Mississippi, back to Mississippi. I got drafted.
Oh, so they
had my basic
in Chicago.
Yeah. I had to go back and really took my basic up there in your town, up in your state, Kansas, Fort Riley.
Okay.
That's where I went to basic, Fort Riley, in 1960.
So you were drafted. You were living in Chicago,
right? They drafted me back,
but Mississippi drafted you,
right,
to go to the Army,
right? And
so you were in the Army. You said in 1960.
I went in August 1960.
Okay, so now what's the link there in photography and journalism?
Is that where I'm walking across the campus? across the base, and the guy said, "You want to buy a camera?" And he had just come from Korea. It was a nice 35 millimeter camera, $25. I got it, and I went and got a roll of film, put it in the camera, and started shooting.
Okay, so you just bought a camera. Some guy selling
another soldier,
yeah,
who needed $25. He sold me the camera for $25. I kept that camera for about 3 years. All the early pictures was taken with the Duke Ellington's My People celebration in 61, 1960 celebration 61 of centennial, freedom supposedly, and all the other stuff that I did, my early pictures taking in Chicago of demonstrations, poetry readings, music, jazz, with that one camera.
You got this camera, so after you got the camera, you just decided to go out and start taking pictures.
Yeah. Some of my first pictures were still lifes. I literally set stuff up and took pictures because I think I was always, my imagination, it was always visual. Even before I went to Chicago, I could kind of visualize it.
Okay. And now, were you taking these pictures just to entertain yourself, or were you selling them?
No. That first, when I was taking pictures of soldiers and selling the pictures to soldiers.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I take pictures of soldiers, sell the pictures to the soldiers. Yeah, right.
So for example, if I'm in the military and I want to send a picture home,
right,
you would be the one who would take a picture of me doing something,
right,
and then I'd pay you for the picture,
right,
and I'd send it home to my folks.
Right. I mean, film costs and processing costs. Of course, I process my own film doing that. They had a lab on base where I learned, how to process.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the sergeant told me from that first roll of film, I had a picture of myself, a self-portrait. I mean, this is 1961. So all these self-portraits, people see me, they think I just started that. That's in 61. It really was my shadow. I took a picture of my shadow in with water coming in. But anyway, it won second prize. But
second prize at what?
It was a contest between me and another guy from California. He won because he knew how to print. But the sergeant told me, he said, look, Lewis, he said, now, the guy's name, he's kind of technical, but you have the eye. This is what he told me. You have the eye. And don't sacrifice your eye for technique, meaning equipment and technical stuff.
Yeah.
The eye is the main point, to see it. You have to see it. I mean, a lot of people have all the equipment, but you have to see it first. This is the camera lens right here, these two eyes.
So you start out in the Army basically selling pictures to make money.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, oh yeah.
And then when did it branch out into, let's say, to document events?
When I came back to Ebony, I got my job back.
After you got out of the Army?
I got out of the Army in 62. And by that time, I mean, 62, a lot of stuff was going on, Kennedy, all that stuff. And so I began to photograph and, turn stuff into Jet. And then I began to get assignments from Jet first. And then from Jet to Ebony. I did, some stories and some, I'd go out in the evening and shoot, go home and process and bring it in on the next morning to Jet Magazine.
So it seems that you were still working in the circulation department.
I was still working in the subscription department.
Getting paid for that.
For the job, yes.
But then in your off time, you were also out there in the streets.
Freelancing, doing assignments, I even did weddings, I did portraits of people, models. Yeah, I had 3 children. I had to take care of 3 children. So, you got to work. There wasn't a whole lot of, that wasn't a big salary. It wasn't a big salary.
But it seemed like you loved it.
Well, yeah, it was meant, it's like, the only other thing I really would have liked to have been with an architect. I don't know, I did drawing in high school, but it was me. It was something about, it takes a village to raise it. With me, my community in Natchez really helped a lot when I was coming up in high school and having some rough times. And so it was like, one of the things about the Johnson publication was the positivity in the news, in covering. And I think one of the things that he wanted to do was to counteract some of the negative that publications, newspapers, magazines did. It was always just crime or this or that. And the negativity that was in the news, even now as we speak, his stories tend to be positive. Other aspects in our community, there wasn't just fights and there wasn't just killing, but there were other things going on. And I think I kind of followed that line. I followed the positive stories.
But it seems like you told me a story one time about Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
You said him and his brother were in Chicago and you sort of followed. Tell us about that.
65. Ali was almost stalking Liscombe. He had a bus with speakers on the bus.
Now, for the viewers, Sonny Liston was the person that Muhammad Ali ultimately defeated to become the champion.
He was
the
champion.
First time. Sonny Liston was champion. Then Ali became champ after he defeated Sonny Liston. So this before or after that fight?
It was before the fight.
Okay, so it's up to
Ali was traveling around. and wherever Liscum would be, he would show up with the speakers and loudmouth him, and
well, saying what?
Yeah, he would just talk about it. You know, he'd really talk about it, and it really was psychological. I mean, he literally
psychological warfare.
He was downing Liscum, and you know, Liscum. He was a proud black man. I mean, you talk about me like that? No. But him and his brother showed up at Johnson, and I had my camera, so me and the other photographer, we went out, and his brother and him was kind of pugging, you know, in front of Johnson. So it's one of my I'm glad to re-find it. I mean, it was in my house, and I just recently found it. But that's working at Johnson. Most people, entertainers, people from Africa, they all came to Johnson because it was the place. Everybody wanted to be
Ebony and Jet. Yeah.
Ebony and Jet. And so they would come through. You got a chance to see, you know, the Hollywood, important people from all over. And so even though you're working there, but it's also like an education. You're seeing Sidney Poitier, Sammy Davis Jr., all these people come through because they want to be, well, not just want to be in Jet, but you know, it was a good thing to be getting Jet. You know.
So you'd sit there and you'd see all these famous black people in and out of the building.
Right.
Occasionally you get a picture of them.
Right. Oh yeah. I would always have my camera there with me.
Yeah.
And you know, I took pictures of, Sidney Poitier, Sammy Davis Jr., a lot of major people coming through. Senghor, the brother from Ghana. You know, Nkrumah. Okay. All those leaders would come to Johnson.
You've seen them with your eyes?
Oh yeah, I got pictures of a lot of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was it looks like a really kind of in place to be.
Johnson was the place. I mean, it was the place because it was a big business. First place, a lot of tours, a lot of young people come through their tours all the time.
Now, is it still where it is now?
No. I was at 1820, South Michigan, and it had moved down to 800 block to the new building. I never worked there. I left in '68.
Okay, but it's still on the same street, but a different.
On Michigan, yeah. I took a leave of absence. I'm literally still on leave of absence. So I told his daughter Linda, I said, I got to come back. You know, they dedicated a statue to him. In 23 in Arkansas City, Arkansas, which I'm really proud that I was there. It's a fantastic statue.
So but eventually you got your pictures inside Jet magazine.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember what your first picture was?
Yeah, you know, they say it was Thelonious Monk, and that was '64, so it probably was Thelonious Monk. I got an assignment from Bob Johnson, who was the executive editor, to go out to Ravenna, which is a concert, outdoor kind of concert place, and went there and photographed Mr. Monk in the dressing room, and then him performing. They ran a picture of him playing the piano, yeah.
So that was your first piece?
I think so.
In 1964.
64, yeah.
Now, a lot of events came through Chicago as well.
Right.
Particularly, I'm thinking about Martin Luther King.
Right.
Coming to Chicago.
66. He came before 66,
right, but,
raising money.
The big protest about housing as I recall.
In the slum movement. That was the V in the circle, in the slum movement.
And you shot some of that.
Oh yeah. I shot rallies. They used to have the Baptist church. They have testimonies, you know, so people come in and talk about their living condition and how bad it was, and so that was covering that for the magazine, for Jet, and then later some for Ebony, and then there were protests, marches for housing. The main one that this picture, for example, was taken at Soldier Field. And of course, this is him with the suit on, but the other picture that was famous was him and I call it Jesse Jackson and Martin Luther King marching on with their legions, because they had those round circular deals up in the air, just like the Romans coming back from battle, you know, and so I call them legions marching on Mayor Daley. This is Sunday afternoon. And I later found out recently that I actually got a picture of him taping the housing demands to the door of City Hall. You know, it's quite dramatic.
So let's hear about this 1966 march. You said that there was one in which there was literally a confrontation of, well, racist whites in Chicago.
Well, yeah, that was in Gage Park. I mean, this is during the time King was there. Actually, it was 66, because the Meredith March was 66. The Meredith March was over, but there was marching in Gage Park because of housing. There was no blacks living in that area, and so we marched over there, and that's the day Dr. King got hit in the head with the rock.
Somebody hit him in the head with a rock.
Somebody threw a rock and hit him in the head. And he stumbled, he fell. We didn't fall they got him up and got him out of there. But meanwhile, we were in Gage Park. We had to get back to our neighborhood. And so we were on buses, they were throwing rocks and cherry bombs. So it was like a battlefield out there. I mean, you out there surrounded by people screaming and hollering at you. And I literally probably was scared there than in Mississippi. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, because when you don't know, cherry bombs are pretty loud. And you've seen what has happened, you know, to Dr. King. And so you got to get back to your neighborhood, you know. So
this is a march where basically the march was disrupted by opponents.
Disrupted by people who lived in that neighborhood. I mean, around that neighborhood. And we were marching in the neighborhood because they were trying to open the neighborhood up.
You know, and I think I told you, I remember talking to a CBS cameraman about that, and he sort of agreed with you that he experienced nothing
never been in
that hateful in the South.
No. It was, I'm telling you, we just left the Meredith March where I missed the gassing where they gassed people in Canton. I missed that because we came in that same day, but we went to Jackson. That was, I'm sure, for those people who were
Meredith
gassed.
March, meaning this was a march that was in Mississippi.
Mississippi, but it was the same year.
Okay, so you had finished with this march in Mississippi.
Right.
And then you came to Chicago.
Back to Chicago.
For a march involving Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King, well, he was living there then. That's when Dr. King was living on the west side. He actually took apartment on the west side in an area that was very highly segregated, and that he worked he was there for nearly 2 years. Of course, he's going back and forth to other places, but he was there and then finally left. I mean, you know, it was a hard, Chicago was very segregated. I mean, you had black neighborhoods, you know, white neighborhoods, and he came to try to help the blacks get better housing in the slum. That was the name of the movement, in the slum. But he ran into a lot of resistance from the Mayor Daley and others, and that, so, you know, it was the way it was in '66.
And what did you photograph a lot of?
Well, I did a lot of the marches. I mean, he wasn't the only one. I mean, we marched. Dick Gregory ran marches just about every day. He'd go out at night and entertain and come back in and march in the day.
Of course, Dick Gregory is a Chicago guy.
Dick Gregory.
He lived in Chicago.
He lived in Chicago. His family was in Chicago. And I kind of vibrated toward marches because it's something about a march, you know, and you got to know how to cover a march. It's like you do it, and you know you're trying to show people what's happening, put people there.
Yeah. But I recall you saying at some point that you could feel the hatred there.
Well, like I said, if you're hearing cherry bombs and you hear people screaming and hollering, I was asked to select some pictures for Encyclopedia, and they had racism was one of the shots, one of the things on how do you illustrate that. And I sent a picture. I had a picture of they had a column of police, and then a little young white girl behind them had on the ground. She had a swastika, swastika. And I said that to me was about that's racism, because she was 8 or 9 years old, and for her to be holding that symbol that meant so destructive. And the kind of things, there were nuns in that march. There were actually people from the Catholic Church in that march, along with a whole spectrum of people, young and old, and the kind of things that were being said. It was, you had to feel it. I mean, if people are screaming and hollering, you know, you hear it, you know, and you're not in your neighborhood, you're in somebody else's neighborhood. So, but, you know, we kept moving, we kept moving.
So you witnessed a lot of history there.
Yeah, that you know, that's the thing about history, is that it's going on all the time. And I kind of felt that the 60s was really an explosive period. There was a lot of changing of attitudes, identifying more, you know, with our cultural heritage, taking on more African, you know, changing names. And so it was an explosive thing, and I kind of felt that underneath that it might not continue, so I felt that I needed to record it for the future, for, you know.
So you've seen a lot of things in your 87 years, Roy. Have things improved in places like Chicago? What are your thoughts?
They have in one way, and they have in another way. Because when I moved to Chicago, there was a big economic, you know, a lot of business, more businesses. I remember the South Side, you know, 47th Street, 63rd Street, a lot of black businesses, and now they're wasteland. I mean, it's, you know, businesses, you know, with the King piece, a lot of stuff was destroyed, but there are a lot of businesses that don't, a lot of streets now that are barren, run down, and that was thriving, that was thriving in the 50s.
That's what I'm saying. So when you came there was black business, and these were like prosperous businesses
all over the South Side,
black people using these businesses, and today
and supporting them.
What do you think? What happened? Do you have
well, you know, there was that period, you know, integration.
Yeah,
everybody kind of
the white man's ice is colder.
Yeah, that period, you know, of integration that never was.
Yeah,
you know, and I think that the fact that things opened up in more commercial areas downtown, and so people had access to a larger area for shopping, and so.
So at some point, Roy, you decided to leave Chicago and come to Washington, D.C. You've been here, what, 50 years?
I've been here since '73. Yeah, so
a little over 50 years. Yeah. What made you? Why'd you make?
Well, education. I mean, we had done a lot of things in Chicago culturally. Wall of Respect and a lot of other things, music. So I moved out here basically to be closer to, able to travel to Africa and do other things and get my family out. Well, you know, it just the East Coast, you know, somewhere. And Washington, I had already decided I was not going to live in New York. I mean, I decided, I had an exhibit in New York, and actually my first exhibit was here in '67, but then it moved to New York. I just decided New York was a little too much. And DC was a kind of second. I mean, I could handle DC.
You know, at some point though, you started going overseas to Africa. Mm-hmm. There was a big fight, 1974.
Yeah,
big fight.
Rumble in the Jungle.
Rumble in the Jungle. Mm-hmm. Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, and you were there.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was really there. I was actually the main platform, where that main camera showing you the whole stage. I was on that platform. I got put on that platform by the people, you know, and me, it was only one other photographer, life photographer on that platform, because that wound up being the main shot. They might have had other cameras, but that was the main shot.
Ultimately, Muhammad Ali won the fight.
Right.
What was that moment like?
It was a great moment because, you know, he had been through a lot of stuff up to that point. You know, I mean, the army, all that other stuff that happened, he lost. And so it was like a win. It's like the world won. You know, because I was there when he lost to Frazier in New York. And I think if he hadn't lost to Frazier, they probably would have put him in jail. It was almost like when he lost that fight, is he won, because I think if he had beat Frazier, they probably would have put him in jail. That's just my feeling. So it was like not just him winning, but like the people. Wally was he was one of the greatest, and people loved him all over the world.
Yeah.
And so it was like everybody identified with his winning.
So your first time to Africa was for that shoot?
Ali, that was it was really something, man, to be, and then to be on right there on the Congo River. Congo River is so wide, man. I mean, you could barely see across it. I mean, I literally woke up that first morning, Sunday morning, because we got in there on Saturday night or Sunday morning, and to look out in the Continental at the Congo River, man. I went down there immediately. I was working in overalls then. I worked in overalls with the pockets for working. That was my uniform at the time.
Huh. So that was your first trip to Africa. Mm-hmm. Your second trip to Africa. That was, you think you told me FESTAC?
Second World Festival of African Art and Culture, yeah, FESTAC.
Tell me about this.
Well, it was something that was supposed to happen in '75, and they didn't get it together, so '77, and it was around this time. FESTAC started around January 15th through February. It was a month. As Lerone Bennett's article in Ebony, 29 days, it shook the world. You had 16,000 participants from all over the world. Artists, musicians, photographers, performers, dancers, musicians.
And they came to
celebrate African culture.
And what place did they come to? What location was it?
Lagos, Nigeria.
Oh, so they all came to Lagos, Nigeria, mm-hmm. from around the world,
from different countries,
around the Black world.
Black world. They were selected. In some cases, they were from national companies, from the countries. That's what they did in their countries. In our case, there were companies, performance companies, but it was not. I mean, the State Department didn't make the selection. It was done by those communities, those cities, those artists were selected by their peers, and there were about nearly 500 of us there. You had half went on one plane, the first part, and then another plane came over with the second part, and the first part went back on that plane. Mm-hmm.
So you had a number of people that came. About how many from the United States?
Close to 500.
500?
Yeah, 500 people.
And so what did you shoot during this festival?
I mean, it was every day something. It was stuff going on. They had 3 venues: National Theater, the Talawafa Bay was square, and then a sports hall. So you had 3 performances, and then the Durbar happened up in northern Nigeria with the horse tributes and all of that. But something was going on every day, all the time.
You were shooting?
I was shooting slides and black and white. Mm-hmm. Yeah, every day.
So
you had schedules, and then our groups from America, our groups were performing in different locations. They had groups. Their National Theater was the main place. That's a big building that.
So this was an idea of like a World Black Festival. Was that the idea? For black people around the world to come together? It
was like a Olympic for culture, black culture from around the world. And they had colloquiums dealing with literature, architect, scholarly works, people there representing the thinkers and the educators.
And the pictures and slides and things you took, where did they appear?
Well, Ebony did a spectacular job. Some of my pictures went into Ebony because I was there at a period when the National Geographic photographer had to come back to America. They did a feature on Harlem, and so they processed my film to look at it. They didn't use anything, but that gave me, I was able to submit some of my work for Ebony, and Ebony ran some of the images.
So National Geographic processed it for you.
Right. I was just, because while their photographers back in America, I was there, and the writers the writer had been watching me work, and he said, "We want to look at your work." So I just turned the film over to them, about 60 rolls of color.
Wow, okay. And then Ebony actually put some of it out there. Did it get the attention that you thought it should have?
Not in America, because it was something that, they didn't really support. Well, I can't say they didn't report. They said they had a reporter there, writers there and stuff. But I don't think it got the kind of attention here. Ebony did some things. I sold pictures to other people. I sold pictures to individuals because I had, I did a FESTAC exhibit.
Yeah.
That moved around, that traveled around. I got a grant from DC Commission on the Art to do the FESTAC exhibit.
And FESTAC stood for, it was an acronym.
Second World Festival of African American Culture.
Okay.
Not African American. The Second World Festival of African Culture. Yeah.
Okay.
Not African American, but African culture.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was obviously a big deal.
Well, yeah. I mean,
over
just
there,
to
but
to be in Africa, and all these performers, everybody participating. They had a fantastic art exhibit.
Yeah.
I had 2 prints in it.
And I guess I had the impression that it was a big deal in Nigeria. That even though
it was a big deal in all the other countries, a lot of the other countries who had official delegation. Cuba was there, Australia with Aborigines. I mean, it was a world piece. Second World Festival. They had first one was in Senegal.
Huh.
But that was mostly State Department. They selected the bands, Duke Ellington, and all that.
Yeah, but this time it was the people
it was the art community in America.
Yeah, wow.
I mean, Jeff Donaldson was one of the main people. You had people that were part of it in Midwest, the West Coast, New York, and so it was very diplomatic.
So, Roy, for, I guess, the last 50 years, partly during that period and up to now, you're still a journalist on the streets of Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I'm still working with, I work at the Washington Foreman now, and I still do freelance work. I do exhibitions and having exhibits, books, working on the book, the big book, the really, really big book, Everywhere with RoyLewis. That's my main exhibit now, and we're trying to get that book out. That book that represents this period of time. From I got that first camera in '61.
So I guess the thing is, and you're 87 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I see you out on the street.
Mm-hmm.
You get on your knees. You get up. You can still do all that stuff. How can you still do it all?
Moderation. I mean, I've taken care of myself, and I basically the children's mother took us off of meat in the '60s. No pork, no beef, and so I basically deal with fish now. I'm trying to even come off of chicken because of all the hormones and stuff. And I take care of myself. You take care of yourself. I'm not as, I'm a walker, I'm a walker, and try to take care of myself, eat right, and, just.
And you've always worked for the black press.
Right.
Why is that?
I mean, because I feel I'm a community person, and I like to tell our story. Not that the other stories don't matter. I mean, I had a couple of assignments with Life, but it's just, I feel, and I've done work with encyclopedias and, industry, but I just feel that my role is working with the black media.
And have you photographed just about every important black person?
A lot of them.
Has it been a good life?
Great life. I mean, I've been in rooms that money wouldn't get you in.
Well, last question I got for you. How many pictures have you taken in your...
I have no idea. Millions. I have no idea. I mean, it's just, I have no idea. I mean, Gwendolyn Brooks, Miss Brooks told me once, Roy, you should never run out of film. That's what she told me. You should never run out of film. It's interesting that she when she saw my first exhibit at the Southside Community Arts Center in '68, January '68, she wrote on there, "You trailblazer," and she told me I should take my notes, should have a diary. And in reality, I do have a diary. It's the camera. It's the picture, the diary. You know, because I shoot in all. People used to laugh. I used to have a camera all the time. They're not laughing anymore because everybody got cameras now, their phone. And, it's the new. Everybody is a photographer.
Yeah.
But everybody can't see.
Meaning?
Oh, I mean, they can see it, but then they can't see it. Sometimes it's right there in front of them. But, you know, it's a little more than seeing. You know, there is a depth within the picture that deals with the person and who they are and how they are. And if you take that into account, like when I give people choice, when I'm out on the street, I give them, they can say no. A person can say no by just a look, you know. And I'm very conscious of not interfering or taking advantage of situations. You know, that's just part of me, who I am. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I love love the people. I love my subjects, and I think I get that. You know, I'm a street photographer. That's who I am, a street photographer. I can shoot in studios. I know light. You got to know light. You got to know light. Light and composition. Yeah. Light and composition. And then underneath all of that is other things that you need to know in order to really, you got to sense the room, you know. Yeah. Like I sense that this is just about, you know, we need to, you know, my weak area is my lungs. I mean, I have issues with breathing and stuff. And so we need to kind of begin to wrap this up.
Okay, Roy. Well, I think with that, I'm going to take your advice and wrap this up. But certainly, it's been great talking to you over the last, I guess, hour or so. Yeah. Roy is a member of the Washington, D.C. Press Corps. You will see him if you go to the Mayor's News Conference or various events here in the city. And he is 87 years old and still going strong. I'm Sam Ford. Thank you for watching.